The National League East is the toughest division in baseball. Quote me, go ahead, do whatever you have to do, but it's true. The winners of that division last year, the Atlanta Braves, 101 wins, 61 losses. Can they do it again? And can they do it with the infield they have in 2023? Let's talk about it here on the Row Report edition of the OK Baseball Podcast. And hello, everyone, and welcome back to the show. Another team preview here at the Row Report here at the OK Baseball Podcast. We're going to dig into the Atlanta Braves today, and joining me from Locked On MLB Prospects, Lindsay Crosby. Yes, we are going to talk about prospects, don't worry, but Lindsay, I know you are a huge Braves fan. I had to get you on. I haven't talked to you in quite some time, so welcome into the show. I'm excited to talk Atlanta Braves with you.
Thanks for having me. And it's nice to kind of get to approach one of these things as a fan more so than as a professional, because I like not covering the Braves professionally, just covering their prospects means I get to have a little more fun here and talk about the good parts of being a fan of Atlanta baseball. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I got to love it. That's one of my favorite things when we're talking in podcast form. We're just having a discussion. Firing from the hip is one of my favorite things to do. Sometimes it gets a little too scripted. And that just, as someone who likes to listen to podcasts as well, I love that. I love that little edge banter as well. So hopefully we get a little bit on this show. But let's dig right into it because obviously, last season was a fantastic year for the Atlanta Braves. 101-61. They won the East against a tough New York Mets team. The last couple of games of the season was super fun. That little battle at the end of 2022, I'm sure you were having a blast with it. Didn't end up quite great in the playoffs. Didn't go as planned. The third place team in the NL East actually made the World Series, not the Braves. Take me back, as a fan, your perspective of the Atlanta Braves in 2022.
So starting off the year, there was this feeling that the Braves were somehow not living up to expectations. And part of it is knowing that you don't have Ronald Acuna to start the year off. Part of it is knowing that Eddie Rosario is not the same Eddie Rosario you had in 2021. It turns out he had an eye issue and he missed a lot of the year. And so it's kind of like 2021 where you can separate it into different teams based on personnel and based on like promotion. So promoting Michael Harris and getting Ronald Acuna back and then getting Rosario back and losing Adam Duvall, it's almost like a completely different outfield than the first part of the year, which mirrors 2021 where you brought in 4 outfielders at the deadline. So it's something where you got behind early, which has happened before. It was the Mets, which that's happened before. And you kind of felt confidence most of the time that you're going to catch them because you do every year. But last year felt a little like it was the first time when I wasn't really sure, like, are we going to catch the Mets or not? And then obviously later in the season, Braves catch fire. It just takes a certain New York radio host saying that the NL East is over for the Braves to prove that it wasn't over. But probably one of the more satisfying division crowns that you've had in recent history, simply because the Mets looked like a juggernaut for so long. And then when the year's over, it turns out that you have a winning record against the Mets and you win the division on a tiebreaker. So I have seen people put that tweet, the NL East is over, on a t-shirt and walk around like some Braves. And that's perfect. I absolutely love that because the hatred between Braves and Mets fans is real. Yeah, there's tons of places that sell like, the merchandise. You can get a coffee mug, all of that stuff. It's like the NL East is over. And it's like, except it wasn't. Braves won. And it's one of those things like you think after a while you'd learn, like you never count your chickens before they're hatched. My wife, just going back to the 2021 real quick, she was watching with a camera, like waiting for the World Series victory for me to just, do that video of everybody jumping up in the air and yelling and screaming. And like, I'm so on edge with a 7-run lead in the 9th inning because I'm like, I can't celebrate until it's done. And the Mets learned the hard way last year. You don't celebrate until it's done. Maybe don't have Edwin Diaz get a live trumpet performance in a divisional game in like late August. Maybe save that for the postseason or something because it didn't work out, did it?
It's very true. That's very true. One thing that we can say is that lately, in the last few seasons, Alex Antropoulos has done a fantastic job on building this team and doing it at really a value. He gets these players at just an interesting rate and keeps them for a very long time. Before I really dig into that, well, I guess it's kind of in between. It's kind of put together. Michael Harris, Spencer Strider, 1-2 in the NL Rookie of the Year race last year. And then you add them to that huge core that is going to be with this team for a very long time. As someone who is a fan of this team, how does that feel knowing that you're not going to see the players that you love and follow go anywhere because they're locked in for quite some time?
It's refreshing as a fan, and it's something where I hadn't thought about this until I saw all the extensions, but like you don't worry about going out and buying a jersey, right? Because that guy's going to be there. They all have full no trade clauses. They're all signed. The entire infield is under control for at least 6 years. 2/3 of the outfield is under control for at least, I think, 7 or 8 years. And it's, 2/5 of the rotation is under control for 5 more years. And it's just like, I can buy a jersey and not worry this guy's going to leave, right? And it's comforting. And I didn't necessarily realize how freeing that was. Just be like, yeah, I can just love this team. These guys obviously like it there. They stayed. They took less money to stay. Now, some of it is they want the security of the guarantee, things like that. But I've noticed with the Braves, they seem to be really good. A lot, not everybody, but a lot of the guys that they've signed early are guys that grew up either in the South with TBS and the Superstation and watching the Braves as kids, or they were international and have some sort of connection to the Braves. Ozzie Albies from Curacao. So was Andrew Jones. When he was a kid, he said he watched Andrew Jones and wanted to be Andrew Jones. Didn't quite get tall enough to do that. But it's just something where it's as a fan, it's freeing because I don't have to worry like my kids. If my kids fall in love with one of these players, they're going to be around for a decade. You're good. It's fine. I don't have to. That's nice. And I've never really thought about that until we are having this conversation now.
Yeah, it's a great feeling to have as someone. I mean, I'm not a Braves fan, but I'm very much a fan of what AA is doing down in Atlanta because, I mean, they're building a fantastic just baseball experience down there. Obviously, the baseball on the field is great, but with new Truist Park as well, and I'm sure you've been there and you sure have had a great time, but the baseball village is just so cool.
The
and the
Battery.
atmosphere around,
Yeah.
It's so cool. Is that what they call it? The Battery? It is just awesome.
It's actually, from what I understand and from what I've kind of read, some of the sports business stuff, like it's the new model for a lot of, if you're building a stadium, doing the mixed use development around it, whether it's hotels, there's luxury apartments, there's retail, and it's another revenue stream. And the cool thing about the Battery and all of these extensions with the players and the merchandise and all of that is the way the Braves are structured. It's a little bit different from most MLB teams where they're not owned by an individual. I wish it was Ted Turner still, but they're owned by a corporation, Liberty Media. And Liberty Media is in essence hands-off. They say the Braves, you can spend whatever money you make. And so the refreshing thing about that as a fan is I almost don't necessarily mind paying to go watch a game from the Battery or going there in the off season to go shopping or, to eat dinner or spending extra money in the ballpark or in the Battery because I know that money is turning around and going right back to pay for these players that I enjoy watching. And as attendance has increased and as spending is increased, the payroll is increasing along with it. And I am aware of how lucky I am as a fan that I can directly see, the more people that are coming to games, the more they're spending on the team, because I know a lot of fans don't get that. And so I think that's the coolest thing about the Battery and what the Braves are doing is you can directly see, yes, me supporting this team with my dollars, my time, my attention goes back into making the team better. And I wish every baseball fan had that. And unfortunately, they don't.
You hear that, Braves fan? You are making a direct impact to the performance on the field if you show up and do things at Truist Park in the Battery. I love it. I had a great time when I was down there. I went to the first year. It was SunTrust Park when I went, but it was, still the same thing. It was still a fantastic experience. Moving into 2023, the offseason was quite interesting for Atlanta because you say goodbye to Dansby Swanson. He's now in the Chicago Cubs. That's a bittersweet, him taking off. Obviously, you have a nice addition or who's going to take its spot. But it's going to look a lot different not seeing him in the middle infield.
Yeah, and Dansby Swanson grew up a fan of the Braves from the Atlanta area, went to Vanderbilt for college, and it's something where a lot of Braves fans, if they are honest with themselves and they kind of discuss it, taking the emotions out, you're happy for Dansby, right? You look at the deal, 7 years, $177 million. One of the hallmarks of Alex Anthopoulos has been all of these extensions were not for more than about $22 million a year. Like that's kind of, it's not a hard cap, but that's kind of where like the max that any of these deals have been. And this is, 25 and change per year for 7 years. The Braves were offering, 5 years, 110, something like that. And so if the money was close and Dansby Swanson chose to leave, you'd have some different feelings. And that you can see that with the Freddie Freeman situation where the money was reported to be pretty close to similar. I don't know if it's him or his agent or whatever, but either way, they choose to be a Dodger. The Braves go out and get Matt Olson. And some of the fans have feelings about it. Dansby Swanson, I think, is going to be loved in Atlanta because he brought the team a championship. And it was a no doubt slam dunk. His wife had been traded to the soccer team in Chicago. His grandfather was a Cubs fan all of his life. And so it's something where he can honor his grandfather, be with his wife, and make significantly more money than he was going to get in Atlanta. No hard feelings. The real question then becomes, like, leadership-wise, 2 straight off seasons, you've lost the big, like, clubhouse leader of your team. Who steps up to take that place and who adjusts for that? But as far as losing Dansby, you're happy for him. You're kind of aware that he probably wouldn't have worked out paying him that much money in Atlanta for his age 30 through 36 seasons. You have other options. You can get them to the point where they can replace eventually Dansby Swanson. And let's be happy for Dansby. Let's celebrate the fact we won a championship with him. He brought a championship to Atlanta for the first time since 1995. And wish him nothing but the best in Chicago.
I love it. Yeah, absolutely. Well, with that being said, Vaughn Grissom is looked to set up to be the new starting shortstop for the Atlanta Braves in 2023. The rest of the infield looks identical. Any worries about Vaughn Grissom at shortstop?
So a lot of Braves fans will tell you there's a little bit of concern because, one, he slumped a little bit towards the end of last season offensively, and that's a kind of a different conversation about when a prospect comes up and they catch the league by fire, and then the league adjusts, which always happens. How long does it take you to change your game to account for that? We saw it with Austin Riley. A slider down and away was Austin Riley's kryptonite for about 3 or 4 months there, and he figured it out. I think more of the concerns for Braves fans with Vaughn Grissom are defensively. Dansby, by the end of his tenure, was so good in the middle infield. And can Vaughn Grissom get to that level? He didn't show it last year, but if Ron Washington says he's good enough, I'm sold. Braves, it's approval ratings in Atlanta are pretty low for a lot of things, but the Atlanta Braves, Brian Snitker, and then Ron Washington are all pretty high up there. And if Ron Washington says he's good, I'm not worried about it. I'm good. He'll be fine. If Ron Washington's comfortable that his defense is good enough, let's take it. Let's go. No worries.
I love it. Now, spring training is fully in swing, and we are getting closer and closer to opening day, which I can't wait. We are finally in the month that opening day baseball, regular season baseball is here. Anything that you're really paying attention to in the spring? I know because the core is really locked in, I'm sure there's not really truly any position battles, but is there anything that's really sticking out this spring for the Braves to pay attention to?
So it's not a position battle, I guess, because it's Vaughn Grissom's job to lose, but you are watching the shortstop position. There is Orlando Arcia, used to be a starting shortstop for the Brewers before he joined the Braves in a trade in, I think, April 2021. Left field, there's a ton of options in camp for left field. You have Eddie Rosario back. He's ostensibly healed now from that eye issue and hopefully trying to recapture the form. But you've got Sam Hilliard, you've got Jordan Luplow, you've got Eli White, just a lot of different options. Kevin Pillar is here on a minor league deal. Just tons of options for that left field job. And then you do have Marcell Ozuna. Braves fans may or may not like the fact that they still have Marcell Ozuna, but he's still owed, I think, $30-something million. And then the fifth spot in the rotation. I understand how lucky you are to be like, yeah, we're worried about the fifth starter. But You have Ian Anderson, who looks so great in that World Series run. I was at World Series Game 3 in Truist Park when he was, I think it was a no-hitter into the 5th when they took him out. And then just struggled down the stretch last year. So he's contending for that job. Michael Soroka. That's the clarification he made. He's Michael Soroka now.
Okay.
Trying to get back to the bigs for the first time in a couple of years. You have a bunch of prospect pitchers. So a couple position battles, but everybody seems to have this really kind of whatever happens, happens. We got a championship. Most of the core is here. There's not a lot of questions. You add Sean Murphy. You can deal with whatever happens in left field. You can deal with whoever's the shortstop and the 5th starting job. Everybody else contending for that's going to be up at some point in time anyway to pitch a game. So it's fine. Braves fans are surprisingly chill this early in the spring.
That's good to hear. When I look at this bullpen, when I look and pay attention to the depth chart on Fangraphs, you see a lot of names that you've heard from in the past on different teams. Maybe you see guys like Luke Leckie, he used to be with the Yankees, Kirby Yates, you've known him from Toronto, San Diego, Joe Jimenez, you got in a trade from Detroit, Raziel Iglesias, you got him from the Angels. A lot of big names in that bullpen, but a lot of older names too. Age, anything a concern for you for this bullpen, or you think that they're in a good spot for the Braves?
I think when it comes to relievers, I don't mind veteran relievers because relieving is such a tricky job. I think more so than the age, I think the bigger question is you only have 2 of these guys that even have options, right? AJ Minter has 1 option. You don't want to send him down. He's your main setup man, your lefty.
Right.
And then Dylan Lee has 2. Outside of that, nobody else in this bullpen has options. And so I think that's almost the bigger story, because something you see a lot of teams do, and they kind of push that limit of 5 designations to the minors per season, but you kind of rotate that back into the bullpen. And you're limited on your ability to do that in Atlanta without sending somebody through waivers. And so I kind of feel like you're probably going to see a couple more injury stints, probably a higher than average amount of injured list stints for Braves relievers this year than the MLB average, simply to give the Braves a way to kind of work around the lack of options. That's probably a bigger concern than the age. Yeah, Lucas Luetge is 36. Kirby Yates is 36. Iglesias is 33. McHugh's coming up on 36. It still feels like they have, for the most part, they have what it takes. They're not 39, 40, something like that. Charlie Morton, starting pitcher, is almost 40. So a little concerning there. But for the most part, I think the options are the bigger question for Braves fans in the bullpen, at least.
That makes sense. Before I get your thoughts on prospects, because we got to talk about some prospects here. Ronald Acuna Jr., obviously last season, we had some good looks from him, but still getting back to his regular kind of pace, right? From the injuries. And then I still think people sleep on Austin Riley. Not sure why, but I still think people sleep on Austin Riley. Which one of those two you think have a better year? We'll throw you on the spot there. Ronald Acuna Jr. or Austin Riley?
As much as I want to say Austin Riley, because I am a big believer in young, thick Austin Riley and what he can do as far as power potential, I think that if Ronald Acuna Jr. is finally healthy, and this is from what we've heard from Winter Ball in Venezuela, from spring training, is he finally is healthy for the first time in 2 years, then Ronald Acuna Jr. is one of the rare players in baseball that could legitimately challenge for a 40-40 season. That's how good Ronald Acuna Jr. is. When he is back to his full healthy form, he's an MVP candidate. And Austin Riley is a very, very good player. He got votes in MVP last year, but Ronald Acuna Jr., when he's healthy, is one of the 10 best players in baseball. And so, big if, assuming that he's healthy, I feel like you almost have to answer Ronald Acuna Jr. for this one, simply because his ceiling is so much higher than almost any other player in baseball, provided that, again, he's healthy, and everything we've heard, he is as of right now.
It's got to be crazy, and it's got to be an amazing feeling to just know that Acuna, Riley, and Ozzie Albies all entering age 26 season. It seems like they've just been on the team for so long, and they're on age 26. Yeah, I think Acuna is set for a breakout year. I really do. I think it's happening, and it's nice to hear that he's healthy. You talk about the 40-40 potential. Maybe him, maybe Julio Rodriguez might be able to get in that. That's about it, right? But with the new rule changes and with these new bases, the pizza box bases, if you will, Thanks, Alex Cora. What's your thoughts on that? You think the 40-40 kind of aspect, do you think that's going to go away to maybe not be so tough of a challenge? What's your thoughts on the fact that maybe we're going to see more stolen bases now?
So there's very few 40-40 seasons in history. I don't think we've seen like more than maybe 2 in a season, like in any one season. And so I think 30-30 might be a little more likely for some guys to get to. Ronald Acuna almost did it 2 years ago, was slowed down a little bit towards the end of the year by a hamstring strain. But for me, I think what I'm most excited about is the renaissance bringing back the catcher, because there's so many catchers in baseball that are not two-way guys. They're just defensive guys. But the defense, we always talk about the framing. We always talk about the blocking. But I think the arm of your catcher is going to be a much bigger impact on your team than we all realize right now. Because if you think about the pickoff restrictions, you get 2 throws over from the mound to the bag. And the third one, if you don't pick him off, he advances automatically. There is no restriction on catchers throwing to bases. And so reports I've heard out of spring training practices, backfields, things like that, a lot of teams are doing a lot more throwing with their catchers, throwing behind runners, throwing ahead of runners, pitch outs, things like that. And Sean Murphy has one of the strongest catching arms in all of baseball. And so I think we're going to see another dimension of catching kind of come to the forefront, because that's right now the best way to eliminate or suppress the running game that's been juiced with these larger bases and these pickoff restrictions is the catcher arm. And so I'm really excited to see that evolution, that battle back and forth between runners and catchers, because the pitcher has his hands tied as far as what he can do. The catcher doesn't. Catcher can do whatever he wants. I'm really excited about watching that develop this year. I think it's a story nobody's really talking about right now.
No, not at all. Excellent point. I'm really excited for that. Everybody talks about the added stolen bases with the bigger bases as well. I'm looking forward to those bloops into the center field or right center field where the runner makes that decision that they might not have made last year. Do I run for second base? Because I think those are the most exciting plays in baseball, when they go and shoot for the double. Like, okay, give me home runs. Those are fine, whatever. But those one portions where they decide I'm going to go try for second instead of just a stand-up single, those are the plays that I'm looking forward to adding more to.
That, and then running first to third on a base hit is something where it's a really easy way for a contender to just improve the offense, and not something that a lot of teams really focus on is the base running aspect of it, and having guys that can go first to third on a base hit, which is helped by having a good secondary lead, having a larger lead off the bat because he can't try to pick you off, things like that. That has a bigger impact on the game than a lot of people realize as well. And so base running as a whole, I think, is going to be appreciated a little bit more after this 2023 season, because if you have a team that has a couple really fast guys like this Braves team does with Albies and Harris and Acuna, you can really kind of take extra bases, really put pressure on a pitching staff just by either getting second on a single or going first to third on a base hit. I think that's going to be an interesting thing to watch and track this year. And there's probably going to be a pretty good correlation between average team speed and teams in the playoffs and run production, simply because of that ability to threaten the defense even more with extra bases.
Excellent point. Well, I know this offseason you really did a deep dive into the Atlanta Braves prospect system over on Locked On MLB Prospects, as you did with all other 30 MLB teams. But in the aspect of the Braves, I'm sure you had a blast digging into that system as a fan and as something you cover. Excuse me. What are some prospects that you are really paying attention to this year in the Braves system? Maybe some that might make their opening day debut, or just some to pay attention to in the system?
So a guy that he probably won't debut on opening day, but someone that you're definitely watching as a 24 guy is shortstop Cal Conley. Everybody knows his name right now because he was called out on a pitch clock violation on the first full day of spring training games to end the game versus the Red Sox. Yep. But 2021 fourth rounder, and he plays shortstop in an organization that doesn't really have a lot of prominent position players and doesn't have a ton of depth. And so very, very good base runner. The defense is above average to plus. The arm is comfortable. And then while he probably has a cap on his power ceiling, just kind of given his frame, he's 5'10", 180, and the lack of raw power. He's somebody that once he gets comfortable in the upper minors against the pitching, you're going to be able to see him come up. And I kind of predict he can be a Chris Taylor type or a Ben Zobrist type that can play 5 or 6 different positions and is going to be like every good, successful World Series team has had that super utility guy who could step in a bunch of different places, could play 5 days a week at 4 different positions. And I think that's what Cal Conley is going to be because his defense is so good, his speed is so good, and it looks like his contact ability is going to be going to cap out somewhere between above average and plus. And so I'm a lot higher on Cal Conley than a lot of other people are, but I think that that's an element this team doesn't really have right now, that super utility guy who can play anywhere. And I'm excited to see what he does, probably starting off in Double-A this year.
Gotta love it. 101 wins for the Braves last year, enough to win the East and the tiebreaker, like you mentioned. Can they do it again? Can they win the East in 2023? And can they surpass 100 wins?
So I think that they can win the division again. When you look at some of the common odds, you'll see a lot of places have the Mets as the favorite, then the Braves number 2, and the Phillies number 3. I think the Braves will still win the division. Just the Mets haven't done it. The Phillies haven't done it. And the regular season's a grind, right? It takes a long time. It's 162 games. And as long as it feels for us fans who are watching these from home, it's even longer when you're having to do this all through the summer in the heat, in the humidity, and all of that. I think the Braves have the organizational knowledge, the institutional knowledge to get them through the long summer, the pitching depth, and just the talent on offense to get them through and win the division. I don't know if they'll break 100 wins again. I think my prediction's probably 96 wins or so. And that's simply because you have a team where the Mets got better. It was incremental because you in essence replaced the guys you lost, except signing a pitcher or two. But the Mets got better. The Phillies absolutely got better, bringing in Trey Turner. And we've seen they now have that confidence of when we get hot, we can mow through the entire National League on the way to the World Series. So I think the rest of the division is a little bit better. But the Braves are still, to me, they're the champs until you beat them. And nobody's beat them yet. And I've got, like I said, 96 wins, winning the division by probably 2 games over the Mets and probably 3 games over the Phillies. And then, probably 35 or 40 over the Nationals.
Yeah, that's crazy to say, but you're probably true. That's how it's going to happen. What's coming up next on Locked On MLB Prospects? And obviously let everyone know where they can find you and what you got coming up.
We have a fantastic week coming up next week. I'll actually be in Florida at spring training. We're visiting a couple different spring training complexes, so stay tuned for that. But we're talking about two-way center fielders. We're talking with our friends over at the White Sox. A lot of different fun stuff. They're looking at forward to the draft. And then if you want to keep up with us and what we're doing, Locked On MLB Prospects, available wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube. I'm on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. The show's on Twitter at Locked On Farm. If you have questions for us, every single Monday is a mailbag, so make sure to get those questions in. We'll answer your question live on the show.
Fantastic. All that stuff, including where you can get the mailbag and stuff, will be in the episode description below. So you can definitely get a hold of Lindsay and talk prospects. If you're a guy that, or anyone that just likes to talk prospects, be sure to follow Lindsay's show because it is the best in the biz when it comes to MLB prospects. I'm not even saying that because he's sitting next to me. It is great. I have been a longtime listener to that show for a very long time for good reason. Lindsay, thank you for joining me on this show. I'm glad that we got to talk as fans, just firing from the hip. This is exactly what I love to do. We got to have you on again. Maybe talk some more prospects in the future, or just shoot the shit and talk the Braves.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right, that's going to wrap it up here for the Raw Report here at the OK Baseball Podcast. We'll be back here with another episode soon. Opening day is just around the corner. We got a couple more teams to cover in this 30-team preview, and then we'll be back with our shows of the normal hour live show on Wednesday nights of the OK Baseball Podcast. But until then, we'll see you back here next time. Take care.